talking about today is how to leverage the internet, the web, all the different things to be able to engage new and different pools of talent. Who here is interested in hiring new and different pools of talent right now? I would think that if you weren't, you wouldn't be in the room. So I'm really excited to have you here and be talking about this. My name is Jessica Miller-Merrill. A lot of people call me JMM, sometimes JM squared, because it's easier to remember. I'm the hyphenated HR lady, is kind of what a lot of people think of me as. I started a blog in 2005. I was a director, HR director at OfficeMax, and it became a business. That's not what I intended to do. I was just talking to job seekers. So a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today, these are things that I started doing very early on. I wanted to build a funnel of candidates, because what happened, and maybe what happens to you, is what happened to me was I worked my first quarter at the company, and then all of a sudden somebody said, hey, we need to fill 350 roles and we need them done immediately. You can get on that, right? And I know what my metrics and my ratios were. I knew that I needed to do 4 interviews before I made a hire. This is inside sales back in the day, and kind of a call center environment for a lot of these roles. And I knew that in order to hire 350 people, this time all primarily in one location, how many candidates I actually needed to have. And I didn't just have them laying around here in the back room, right? Or, I keep them in my master bedroom closet or something, and I pull them out when we need them. That's not how recruiting and hiring works, but a lot of time our hiring managers and our boss or the CEO, they don't necessarily understand that. So not only do they want great people, or they say, things might shift and change as the urgency continues to grow, but then we also need to have a diverse candidate pool. And in one of my last roles in corporate HR, I worked for a company where I had to have an affirmative action plan. How many of you are an affirmative action employer? Anybody here? Okay, a few people in the room. So diversity has always been important, but I'm going to date myself. I used to send a fax to a bunch of people with a letter letting them know about the openings, and that was really all I had to do. Sometimes I could put a photo or an ad in maybe a women's magazine or something like that, and that would satisfy my affirmative action goals. The rules have really changed, and there's different things. I'm not going to go into a lot of the requirements for affirmative action, but the internet offers you so many different opportunities to engage a lot of different groups of people. It's really limited to your creativity and your time, which I realize that all of us don't have all these things. So that's kind of my background and how I got started. I kind of consider myself an anthropologist of human resources. I'm definitely a nerd, and so I use my podcast, a lot of my spare time reading about HR, so I'll be inspired by something from a client or a friend of mine says, oh my gosh, can you believe that this happened? And then I kind of go down into the rabbit hole. So I first spoke on the topic of my book, I think 7 years ago at SHRM Talent, and from there I started working with an organization that was focused on technology and employment for people with disabilities. And so I have continued to grow that area, sort of the nerd, the HR anthropologist, really focused on the diversity talent area and how we can tap into that using tech. And so many of us are using this every single day, right? You will go to the bathroom and take your phone and leave your purse. It'll happen. You'll do it. And the first thing you do in the morning maybe is text your husband to say, hey, can you bring me a cup of coffee, which I tend to do. I called him this morning to ask him something because I didn't want to get out of bed. But that's a little bit about me. So I'm a total nerd when it comes to human resources, and just love this topic because really it offers us the opportunity to really get really creative, but we're not going to just focus on the creativity side here. We're going to focus on the metrics and the business of this, because this is how you move the needle and grow your budgets and maybe your headcount if an organization is truly focused on improving and growing their diversity numbers. Who here, is anybody in a diversity, a DEI role right now? A few people, okay. So a lot of you are, let me get a pulse of the room here. How many people are a department of under 5 on your HR team? Okay. All right. Anybody, how many are from Austin area? Okay, we're neighbors. I love this town. I've moved here 6 years ago, and it's such a great group of people. And where else can I speak on human resources and go have a craft beer later? Not very many. All right, so here's kind of what we're going to be talking about in our time together. We're going to talk about how to prioritize your diversity, talent attraction efforts using the internet, my favorite thing. How do we create small wins to help expand and grow our efforts? Because most of us are small teams here. You're probably doing a million different things in the course of a day. I know I am as a small business owner with my team. I feel like I'm going always 300 million directions. It really hasn't changed whether I had an HR team or a small business owner. It's a lot for us. And then we're going to talk about some DEI creative strategies. So I'm going to give you some examples. We're going to watch a few videos so you can kind of maybe be inspired. You don't have to have a big budget to make an impact. I'm all about being creative on the cheap and using technology and tools that maybe you already have or your organization already has to grow your DEI efforts. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some little known ways to reach qualified candidates. Okay, so if you're interested in my book and you want to know what's going on with it, you can text. And if you want to see how I'm using text messaging for engagement and just information and communication, you can get out your phone and send a text. This, I actually see, this is not my phone number specifically, but a text community number. Text messaging read rates are 99% within the first 60 seconds. Candidates don't want to talk to you on the phone necessarily. Sometimes candidates can't talk to you on the phone. I talked to a DEI expert this last week, and she said she's hearing impaired, she's deaf. She said she can't talk to you on the phone. So if you call, she can't answer. So she would like for all of us to add a little box to our applicant tracking system that says, my preference is text. But it's a great way to be able to reach 99% of your people in real time. I remember when I was calling at Office Max and I would try to schedule interviews, my number came up as unknown, and most of the people thought I was a bill collector or something. And I don't answer unknown numbers either. I actually had one this morning. Turns out it was somebody important that I should have picked up the phone for. They sent me a text and said, hey, I just tried to call you. So text messaging is a great way to just increase your engagement and maybe be more accessible and inclusive to different kinds of people, like my friend Meryl, who is hearing impaired. All right, so let's talk a little bit about diverse workforces. And I recognize that we're in Texas, which isn't necessarily the most inclusive state in terms of employment laws. But I'm going to assume that for a lot of this, we are hiring people outside of the state of Texas and potentially outside of the US, all right? So it's not just about employment law, but it's about the fact that having a more inclusive and diverse workforce makes us more money. We just have to be focused on making the business case to our executive team to be able to say, like, this is happening and this is why we are better. Personally, my team is global, and we have people from all over the world, from different ethnicities and backgrounds, and they like working with me because we, number one, get things done, and number two, it's a lot of fun. Do you want me to move over for camera? Oh, for microphone. We have microphone. Oh, yeah. Fancy technology. Thank you. One of the stats that I really love comes from Glassdoor. Candidates want to know that you are diverse. They don't just want to see pictures of employees on the website, but they want to know, and that means reviews, videos, conversation. How many of you might spend a little bit of time on TikTok? Doesn't mean you post, but you watch videos. That is where a lot of candidates are right now, and they're sharing information about their experiences, what it's like to work at your company. So it's not just review sites where they're looking for these things. It is everywhere on the internet. So I'm not saying you have to be all places, but it's important for us to think about if we do want to communicate and let people know that we are diverse, that we are inclusive, and we want new kinds of groups to come and work for us, we have to show up that way. And primarily candidates are using review sites to look for just information about your organization. So it means photos, responding to questions. If somebody does say, I didn't feel like I was included, making sure we're responsive and we take action so people can see those kind of things. But diversity really helps an organization be productive. And if you are trying to make the business case to be able to get more money or headcount or grow your DEI efforts, Accenture has a really great report I can send over to you. This is an area that people are really trying to understand more in light of the George Floyd murder. I think that has really put it into the forefront. And this is why I continue to talk about it, because yes, it's been over a year since that horrific tragedy happened. We need to keep having conversations. I'm not saying that every white woman that talks about DEI should be the only one leading the conversation, but I'm bringing everybody I can along with me and shining a spotlight on the fact that diversity is important and we need to have diverse groups. We also need to be having conversations with our employees about our diversity efforts. I'm going to talk about that more here in a minute. What's really important is we need to not necessarily think about all diversity, but prioritize your diversity. So, all right, done. If you are thinking about growing diversity, I want you to think about where your greatest hiring needs are and where your weakest spots are in terms of DEI. And that means taking a look at your numbers. Even if you aren't in an employer who has access to EEO-1 information as affirmative action, you can still make some basic judgments or make some inferences. And take a look. It's a little bit easier to say the number of females versus male, or people who identify as female versus male, to go ahead and get started there, or the number of veterans that you have in your organization. These are important ways for you to begin planning your DEI efforts. So start small. That is tip number one. If you have a hiring maybe challenge like I did in inside sales, or maybe it's in a more technical area like cybersecurity, start to research and see what are some diverse groups that I can be able to engage. One of my friends has a nonprofit and he is focused in the cybersecurity area. They have an apprenticeship program where their candidates go through an 18-month apprenticeship with you, and they get trained. They get feedback, they get paid. They are neurodiverse individuals with autism. This is a great way to grow your diversity and inclusion without having to do a lot of work. You partner with somebody else who can help bring those candidates in. Yes?
Yeah, when you say you identify where you're weak, how do you identify if you're weak with an LGBTQ community? Is that information not kept?
So if you have access to an ERG in your organization, which is Employee Resource Group, that's a great way to sort of mildly start to identify and understand areas. So you might ask for nominations for an employee resource group and just kind of keep it a general one, and then have your employees tell you. So a lot of this is driven based on not necessarily stats, unless we are tracking diversity information, but it's more anecdotal, and that's getting the pulse from the employees. So great question. We need to ask, what do you think? If all of your photos on Instagram are of the same people with the same type of faces and they look the same way, it's time for you to change your diversity efforts. But I think that an ERG is a great way. Who has an ERG here? It is probably the simplest and most fundamental way. And really, I would just set up a Google form and send it out to everybody with an application and say, hey, who is interested in being part of our employee resource group that's focused on the areas of growing our DEI? Then you can accept nominations, and then you can sit down and talk to people, and you can get instant feedback on what they see is important, because they're the ones who are dialed in to all those conversations in the organization. And not only that, they feel invested in the change, then they're going to go out and be your kind of little beacons for sharing information and communication out there. So, but LGBTQ plus is a really good ERG to start with. There are organizations that have 10 different ERGs. We'll start with a general one, and then you can kind of branch out from there. Another question over here.
So every company I've worked at has been reluctant to have DEI goals and publish them. So it makes it really hard for me as an HR business partner to say, like, well, let's move the needle in these areas. And I've never really been able to influence leaders to put those out or to make a decision on them. So do you have any tips on how to make that more real? Because everybody wants more diversity, but nobody wants to actually state their percentage.
Or they say they want more diversity, but they don't actually want you to measure the information, because it's easier being unaware and oblivious to that, right? It's kind of like I say my master bedroom, but like if I shut the doors, it's not a mess, right? I don't look at it. It doesn't mean it needs to be organized. And I think that's how we're looking at DEI. We just want to be like, la, 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 I'm not interested. It's not a problem because I'm not thinking about it. So I feel like an ERG is a nice way, because imagine the number of people, if you have, who join the ERG, then you have some real feedback and information that you can bring to your executive team. And it doesn't have to be a formal ERG. It could just be some brand ambassadors who happen to be maybe interested in diversity, equity, inclusion. Another thing that you could do is just a simple survey and ask them if they feel valued here, or they think that we are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, yes or no, or very likely, somewhat likely, and do a pulse question just to kind of get the conversation started. I also have some podcast interviews that are really great of HR practitioners who are doing things in the DEI space that I can direct you to as well, because I think learning from each other is the best way to make the business case for expanding our DEI. I love the vertical idea, and focusing on verticals allows you to be able to measure this specifically. Now, if you are going to focus on veterans or maybe women in technology or something like that, having a special landing page just for this can help you track metrics, because then we can see the number of people who go to these pages and then what the conversions are for them. Then we can see the turnover and the retention from our efforts, so we're able to make the business case. You can measure cost per hire for vertical. We can measure the number of applicants. We can measure effectiveness of source per hire. And so potentially, maybe this campaign that we're doing on veterans recruiting nets us more qualified candidates, and we're able to fill roles quicker because our time to fill is less. These are all money conversations, things that lend to money, because if we fill an opening on a sales team faster, that means we're generating more revenue once they get changed. So suddenly HR and recruiting is no longer a cost center, but now they're a business center. And so then I can say, we filled these roles with this campaign 5 days sooner on average. That is a result of maybe $25,000 more in revenue through the sales team we're able to create. Then I have a business case to be able to say, I need more money to do more of this. If you liked what you were seeing here, imagine what I can do with an extra $15,000 or a half of a head count to be able to be focused on diversity sourcing, right? And there's some really amazing tools that can help us in the sourcing arena as well, where we can start to engage. I want you to think about this beyond just a standard newsletter. I want you to think about making videos or other resources to engage candidates on other platforms. I talked about TikTok. I'm in love with TikTok. I'm all in. There are so many opportunities for us to make short 15 to 60-second videos to talk about why we're a great place to work, the type of people that work here, and it doesn't have to come from HR. It can come from somebody on your team that works in that role, and that's a friend or a peer. Verticals are so powerful, and we can repurpose that content in a lot of different places. I have an example for you that's 35 seconds here in just a minute, and I will say that you can edit this on your phone. There is a millennial that you know somewhere that can do this. I am not a millennial, and I asked my daughter, who's 13, like, hey, how do I make these videos? And she's like, oh, it's super easy. Just shoot some videos and then download this tool that's free called CapCut, C-A-P-C-U-T. You upload your videos, you can put your text and all your things and do all the editing in the phone. It doesn't take me very long to do. In fact, she had me download this video, and then we went to the A&M volleyball camp this summer, and I shot my videos in under 45 minutes. I made this like little 60-second video with some, music approved, where I did a voiceover talking about what it was like to drop my daughter off at the A&M volleyball camp. You could do that with anything. What a day in the life of a candidate. What it's like for our, female leadership team. What is it like for our, interns? Ernst & Young is doing some really cool stuff on TikTok, as well as also with CVS too. And they're not just saying, here's a job posting that I have where they point to a bunch of things. I have a whole host of those on my TikTok. But they're talking about what it's like to work there. They're telling the story, and it's coming from the candidate or the employee, which builds trust. They don't necessarily want to hear from us, which I think is the challenge. And maybe you're not comfortable in video, but I would say that most millennials are, and they probably would be willing to do it. And imagine if they got featured by you on your channel, they're going to share with their community. This is what a lot of companies like AT&T have done. They've done day in the life videos where they let somebody have a takeover. Started first with like Snapchat, but now you can do it on TikTok, and they'll shoot videos. They'll make stories. They'll talk about what it's like to work at their company or your company. What it's like to be a remote employee. That's a big thing I'm seeing right now on TikTok. Everybody wants to be at the beach, right? And so if you have remote positions, you should be sharing those stories on social media. And if you can talk about it from a DEI angle and have different voices and different people who look different and act different and have different backgrounds, that's going to lend to diversity efforts. I would record those videos, download them, and then repurpose them all other places. You could make a mashup video and post on YouTube that would be embedded into your career site landing page. Super easy. And if you outsourced a lot of that work to a virtual assistant, it could cost you under $500 to do in terms of digital editing.
What was that editor called?
CapCut, C-A-P-C-U-T. You can thank my 13-year-old daughter. All right, I have a short video I want you to watch. And really, you could do this in CapCut. Oh, hold on.
Anyone could land on a runway in the Air Force, but I always thought it was really cool to land on an aircraft carrier. I was in the Navy for 12 years. My current role is a cloud evangelist, really pursuing a lot of our infrastructure and platform as a service opportunities in the public sector. The thing I do just for fun is running. I occasionally mix that in with some biking. What I like most about working here is people. The team I'm on is full of really good, qualified, smart people that I want to be more like.
"35 seconds, all about Oracle's veteran hiring program." I could make this for you in under 45 minutes. And if we had 5 employees there, we probably could shoot all of them in a really short amount of time and then send them over to somebody on your marketing team or some sort of graphic designer offshore to be able to take care of these for you really easy. And then imagine putting these on your career site for those specific landing pages so people can see, oh, there are people that look like me or act like me or have a background like me. We need to have these conversations, and they need to come from not us as HR professionals, but they need to come from our employees within. I love this because if you have an all-hands meeting or something, really, you can just say, hey, we have 5 people, we want to do some filming. They don't have to be pictures of them running. It could just be some video with different looks about what they like to do. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated, and the beautiful thing about TikTok and Reels, if it's perfect, nobody's going to watch it. They like it when you mess up. They like it when it looks like you're hitting the button and you're moving your arm to shut off the video. That it feels more authentic and real. It doesn't feel post-production edited, right? And you can do that with little to no money, a small amount of time. I normally will tell you that when I'm recording TikToks or Reels, I like to do them in batches. So I will have a group of like 20 videos that I want to do. I pull up the sound if I'm doing sounds, and then I just record myself. And I'll do it in about an hour. And then depending upon how much I'm posting, that could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of content. So if you go to my TikTok, those are things that I shot a week and a half ago. And so I don't have to worry about it necessarily today. I did bring my stand because I've got my lashes on my lipstick, and I thought this would be a good day to do some TikToks. But in general, I just do them maybe once or twice a month. And most creators are doing things that way. I also want to talk about ways to get engaged. Now, events are back, but we also have so many online events and things happening. There are so many great conferences happening online. There's so many great diversity podcasts or veteran hiring podcasts or our communities that you can go engage. One of my favorite here locally is meetup.com. Have you ever done anything on meetup.com? ATXHR started out on meetup.com. They branched into Facebook and other places, but there are so many great meetups happening here in Austin. Capital Factory is also a really fantastic place. They have a great events newsletter that comes out with a lot of different things. It's not just about startups and founder events. They do a lot of other things. So find ways to attend an event if you're able. If not, the beautiful thing about the internet is that you can do it from home. Or somebody in your team can do it from home. Or somebody who lives in Florida can be at an Austin event and it's happening remotely, right? Engagement can happen. One of the things that I will say is you can also create your own events too, and I will want you to think about that. One of my favorites is AT&T has done a phenomenal job for years. They've had a Women Who Code Twitter chat where women just come and it's anywhere and they just tweet and they have different guests and different topics. Another thing that AT&T does well too is they have office hours where you can go and ask them anything about veteran recruiting. So these are just small ways. You don't need to have a fancy CRM to be able to have a veteran recruiting chat. You can just have people talk to you on Facebook. Maybe if you have a Facebook page in the chat, they can just join, which is pretty awesome. Or you could just have them tweet. That's great too. I like the chat because then it's a little bit more controlled, right? You can take it offline relatively easily, so it doesn't become something where my fear would be like negativity would happen, right? But those things are normally controlled relatively easily. But I would encourage you to try an event. So pick a vertical. Let's do that today. Let's think about a vertical or somewhere that we would like to focus on diversity recruiting. Let's write that down, okay? And then I would like you to think about maybe one online event that you could either participate in or that you could create. And when I mean you, I don't really mean you. If you want to delegate that to somebody on your team, that is probably ideal for you. Set it up, send it over to somebody else who is an ambassador for the organization. Maybe they're involved in your ERG or whatever, and have them take ownership on that. What we want to do is look at the specific landing pages that we're driving people to, the Veterans Program, the Autism Hiring Program, the Women, the Females in the Workplace Program, the High Potential Program, the all these different verticals that we can pick from. We can go down those areas, and then we have the metrics. One thing I would encourage you to do is get metrics. So if you are setting up specific landing pages on your site, there's this thing called Google Analytics that is free. Your IT team can add this to your website, and it can track where people are coming from. Does anybody have Google Analytics? Okay, it's super easy, and it's free. You just go to Google, there's gonna be some code that's gonna be embedded. Your IT team is gonna be mad at you. It's okay, have them do it. And then you can be able to track and see when people come to specific pages, where they go. For example, I worked with a financial institution, their credit union out of New Jersey, and we found that most people came to their career site not actually from the careers tab, which was at the bottom of the website. It came from an announcement about the fact that they were best places to work. So that said to me, we either need to talk more about best places to work and we need to move that career site tab up to the top. But that is going to help you understand. So when we create these verticalized campaigns, you'll be able to see the number of people that go and then the number of people that go through your program and then how many people we convert. And that's how we get the executive approval to be able to get more budget. If our DEI efforts are suddenly producing a bunch of A players, the retention's different, or like I said, time to fill, those are all money conversations. And then DEI is a business decision. It's not something nice that we do because it's in the media, which we should already do those things because it's the right thing to do for human beings, because we're empathic leaders, but it is impacting the business negatively or positively. If we don't participate, it's negative. If we do, it could be a positive impact. All right, so I want to show you, do you want to do this for me? Another program. I mentioned Microsoft. This is a 3-minute video, so a little bit longer.
When I was diagnosed with autism, the psychologist explained it like there were very limited career capacity for me.
Before I came to Microsoft, I was struggling to get employment, and I had these skills in math, but nobody was giving me interviews, and it didn't seem to be going well. I worked a couple of minimum wage jobs. It was work, it paid the bills, but I definitely could feel that I was destined for something more.
I feel like I get to have a pretty significant impact on Microsoft.
By having people with disabilities in the fabric of our company, you're building in a diverse workforce that then represents the 1 billion people with disabilities out there. We're going to be building better products, we're going to be building better services, websites, anything that we do will work across the spectrum of being human.
And so every time we get an opportunity to bring somebody in who can see things from a different angle, every time that happens, That's where we find these great creative types who can come in and help us deliver the things that we care about.
I'm Cody Takayoshi, and I'm a software engineer at Xbox Live.
My name is Joey Chemis, and I'm a data scientist here at Microsoft.
MJ Gardner, software engineer on Azure build pipelines and engineering systems.
There is just an incredibly high unemployment and underemployment rate when it comes to autism. A traditional hiring process, that's not going to allow someone with autism to show up and show their strengths.
For me, the autism hiring program was the chance to finally, make it. You're saying, here's the things that come with autism that the standard interview process would flag. Here's how we accommodate those issues and make them less of an issue. And here's how we allow the person to really shine and show their true colors and abilities.
I think this is just a better way of evaluating. This is just probably a better way for anyone.
People are looking for companies that reflect humanity. There is incredible talent out there in the marketplace that should be in our company.
This program has given me a mirror to reflect on the things that make me different, or how could I maybe change the way that I work in order to bring some of these experiences forward.
My hope for the future is that we won't see this as a program, but instead a natural way to recruit key talent in our organizations.
So if I was talking to a younger version of myself, I would let myself know that
probably the most successful autism hiring program that is currently out there. And what's interesting is I believe the creator lives here in Austin, who is kind of the face of the Microsoft hiring autism program. So this is really critical for their technology candidates. They have a specialized interviewing and hiring process that takes into account that the individuals who are going through this program might not answer questions or engage in an interview in the typical way that someone who is not neurodivergent would. And hiring managers and those who are interviewing go through specialized training to ensure that they understand how that process is. And it has been incredibly successful. We talked about the ERGs. I want us to also think about talking to our candidates. So when we start a program like this, we should be asking them for their feedback, which I know is incredibly scary. One of the easiest ways to do that is what is called an NPS score. It's called a Net Promoter Score. It is one question that you send to them via text or email that says, please rate me on a scale of 1 to 100 if this is an inclusive workplace, or did you feel like you were that you had the right form of communication? You choose the question. It is meant to be a very broad-based question, but you're asking for feedback. 1 to 100, that's a lot of options. Now imagine if I asked you today how you feel about your job on a scale of 1 to 100. It's not a forever number. Today I might really love my job. Tomorrow I might be ready to find something else. But this is just to get instant feedback for us to be able to see kind of behind the curtain how candidates really feel. I like the one question because it's easy and you're going to have a higher engagement rate. One of my friends, John Reeves Whitaker, he is out of Dallas, Texas. He works for a healthcare company that does a lot of mergers and acquisitions. They just went through their first employee Net Promoter Score. They asked every employee in their organization about what do they like working here on a scale of 1 to 100. What do you think that the score he got was? Anybody? 70. A 16. Oh, wow. Yeah. Yes, you can. No, so he was very excited that they didn't get a negative. They were happy. Leadership was happy with their 16 because now they know. Now they know exactly where they have a base, where they need to start from, where they need to grow. I would encourage you to ask one question to your candidates. Yes?
So with that question, how would you know where to start? I mean, the answer is no, I'm not happy.
A number like this is the number you take to the executive team and say, on a scale of 0 to 100, how do you feel about working here? And they're all going to think it's going to be a 70, right? Because we thought that. And then you show them the number 16. That number says action is going to be taken, because nobody wants to be a 16. But honestly, an NPS score that is a 40 is a great score, because some people have bad days, some people have good days. But it allows you quickly to start the conversation with the leadership team. This is kind of like a smack in the face, and then you walk off, right? If you want to be able to make an impact with your executive team, you're going to have to shock them a little bit. And then my suggestion for you, once you have that, their attention, is then you say, we're going to have a focus group meeting, or we're going to do X, Y, these steps next. But I need this budget, this headcount, this something to be able to start the journey into this. They're doing the NPS survey every year. But the kicker for them is their leadership teams' bonuses are tied to this NPS score. Suddenly, everybody gives a damn. And for an organization that is growing very quickly, they are doing lots of small mergers and acquisitions all the time. They need to have that feedback so that they can work from it quickly. So it's quarterly, not annually, that they're asking this information, but it's tied to quarterly bonuses for the leadership team. I saw another question over here. Was there? Oh, yeah.
So if a 40 is a good score, but people expect it to be more like a 70, how do you, I guess, get people's expectations in line with what reality is going to be?
Great question, and I have a lot of information on NPS scores on my website, and some additional training for you in those areas. But I like the idea of a single question because it's so simple that it is easy for you and I to execute as HR professionals, and then we can go into the discovery phase a little bit more deep. And maybe that's talking to our ERGs or a small group of employees to sort of get a better understanding. But you're going to, with shock and awe, be able to have that conversation. Yes?
So what type of question would you ask the candidates versus the employees?
It depends on what you want to measure. If you're interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, maybe you just ask a question on inclusion. Or I feel like this company could be a place that could be welcomed. Or I felt like I was valued as a candidate in the hiring process, 0 to 100. Yes.
You're competing with a very different time lately, and the idea is, because it's a candidate market, we're trying to kind of summarize the data instead of having a really long job description, keep the process very simple. What's your return on these surveys that you are asking us to send out to the candidate? Or how much have you seen people actually responding back? From my experience, I've seen candidates they're not applying to all jobs, they're applying to very few jobs that they think they're fit. And in the whole process, we act the survey, that kind of asks them for an extra few minutes, and I've noticed people actually stepping back if they're seeing the process too long. So what have you seen the return on these surveys from the candidates?
I like a text message survey where they can just respond back, number one. So you want to make it easy. When they have to click on a link and fill out a bunch of information and they don't feel safe, but if it's just a text that's automated as part of the candidate journey, like once maybe they get to the completion of the first interview, it's just automatic, depending upon what CRM or applicant tracking system you have. It's also, when they're still involved in the hiring process, they're more likely to complete the survey, because they might think that if they don't complete the survey, it means that they won't move farther on in the process. So I would encourage you to put it in the middle stage of the process just to get some feedback. You can always do a survey with the hires that you've made once they go through onboarding to ask them more specific information, which I would encourage. You should ask them what their job search was like, what tools that they use, maybe the number of interviews that they went on, or where they were spending their time on social media and online. Are they looking at Glassdoor, or are they on TikTok? You'll be able to find out those questions, and that's going to help you decide where you want to spend your time and efforts on. All right, I want to go through, because I have some really good examples for y'all. I feel like job boards are pretty explanatory. I do have a list if you're interested, and you can always text in to the number too, which I'll show again here in a little bit, and I'll send you more resources. I have a list of job boards by protected class that I have used in the past or enjoy working with. So that will give you kind of an idea. There are more and more every day, and so many great ones for different resources. One of the things I feel like is really important is the benchmarking piece. So that means research. That means asking questions. That means metrics and tracking. So Google Analytics, very important for us, so we can understand the journey of the candidate. And then we need to survey our people to understand where they're spending their time, number 2. Number 3, we need to know who our people are and what protected group or they identify in, so that we can understand where our gaps lie. So that involves some trust. So if your organization is a toxic one, or is one that is not filled with trust, a foundation of trust, this is going to be really challenging for you. One of my favorite examples that I want to share for you, and I have a podcast interview with Christy Robinson. She's the VP of Talent and Diversity for BarkBox. They went public in 2021 on the NASDAQ, and they're now publicly traded. Before Christy came on board, she was their first DEI leader, and I find it very interesting that she's in charge of talent and diversity, which that is not really common. But BarkBox has had a commitment to DEI for a very long time. They publicly, within the organization, on their intranet, post salary information and their diversity numbers. Anybody at BarkBox can go on there right now and be able to see that information. If your organization chooses to be that transparent, I think it's a great way to really kind of put the leaders' feet to the fire and make sure that they are committed to this. Now, BarkBox is an unusual case. Their EVP is basically treat your people and your customers like you would your dog. Because honestly, how good does your dog? I mean, my dog gets 1, sometimes 2 treats a day. They get all these extra things. They're treated a lot better than maybe other people in our organization. So that's their mission statement, their employee value proposition, and they use everything in their branding and all their campaigns. But they post their salary information, and they're completely transparent. They also, because they are willing to post that information, their NPS scores, the willingness and involvement of their ERGs is a lot more robust, I think, than typical, because they are a fully transparent organization. But sometimes it takes like a really crazy idea or something to really build that trust. Let me give you another example. The VP of HR for a company called Refine Labs. They're a marketing agency, a small company, 250 employees. They made the very public decision to have a starting salary for everybody at their agency on par with the San Francisco living wage. Does anybody know what the living wage in San Francisco is? $75,000 a year. Every employee at their company makes at least $75,000 a year. They have 250 employees. How many people do you think they actually increased salaries for? Like 7. It was very minimal. But that tool has been really effective at building trust and their talent attraction efforts. Because I connected with her because I saw a post on LinkedIn where they were talking about her and Refine Labs and their $75,000 minimum. So it was a media opportunity, and she's able to talk about their organization because she's competing against the large marketing agencies. So they're using their expertise as marketing and PR experts to put it out there and be able to have conversations about what's different and unique about them. In fact, that is one of my suggestions and strategies for you all, is to put yourself out there or somebody on your team out there. An effective strategy I'm seeing right now is most of you probably have a PR person who is pitching. Y'all need to be pitching to diversity podcasts, media outlets, and things, and getting you or somebody on your team or an employee who has had media training to talk about what you're doing. If you're a DEI person, you need to be pitching. If you're an HR person who has an interesting story like Jessica Williams, you need to be pitching. Even if it's something small, even if it's you got Austin's best places to work, you need to be having your PR team send out PR pitches and talk to job boards, communities that have these diverse groups so you can talk to them about what you're doing. It's an inexpensive way to reach these candidate pools, and it doesn't cost anything but your time. And if you got on 2 podcasts a month or had 2 media interviews, imagine the number of candidates that you might be able to track in that one niche or that area that we wrote down in the beginning of the conversation. Questions so far? I'm a definite fan of a diversity scorecard. I can also send you a sample template of what that looks like. It's really not that unlike your regular recruiting scorecard, except you are focused on tracking information by protected groups or whatever your focus is. Okay? So if your focus is you want more Hispanics in this specific position or overall, then you're going to track those numbers. Okay? You're going to have to ask for that information. I have a really great interview on diversity scorecards also on my podcast from a woman from Unilever. And what was interesting in our conversation was that Unilever is a great company. She has this incredible job where that's what she does. She tracks diversity metrics. She is struggling too. She is struggling to make the business case to her boss, who's struggling to make the business case to their boss. So it's not a company size thing. It's happening to all of us. And she said that to me after the podcast. And I was like, man, I wish you would have said that during the podcast. But it doesn't always work out that way, right? We want to put our best selves when we go speaking, when we're on a podcast or doing media interviews or doing a webinar. But sometimes the real stuff that we talk about, I think, is the most impactful. And so if a company like Unilever is struggling with DEI, it's okay for us to say that we're struggling when we're a team of under 5. We just have to pick one strategy or one plan to focus on and then focus on the metrics. Is when we throw spaghetti on the wall and then say we're doing DEI, we don't have a story to tell our executive team. And I think that's the thing, because we have been kind of always throwing spaghetti. We've been sending off the faxes to all the people, AARP, different places, putting my ads in my women's magazines. We were already doing spaghetti. We were throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks. And then, it stuck, we're done, DEI done. But we really need to start with the basics and think about our online digital metrics. And that means working with IT, with the Google Analytics first, and then creating these verticalized pages. Because otherwise I can't track what I'm doing. I can't track conversions. That is people joining your talent community or applying for a job. And then your specific campaigns and programs can be tied to a unique job listing that you can measure. Then you can say what your time to fill is for diverse candidates versus a non-diverse focused campaign for the same position. Does that make sense? The other thing I want to say about BarkBox is they also measure their employee turnover and attrition by protected class. And they also follow this information very closely. They will look at performance reviews. I'm not saying that we should all do that, but it's also important for us to make sure that that information is in the right hands, if you know what I mean, because I feel like this information is something that could be used for evil and not good. But if we have employees in a certain protected group or class that are having problems sticking around our organization, we should be maybe spending more time with exit interviews, doing skip-a-level interviews, or talking to executive teams. Or our leaders that are experiencing a lot of turnover. If you can tie that to a certain minority group or a protected group, that's a huge conversation and training and a lot of different things need to be happening. It saves us a lot of money on the front end versus the back end. I have dealt, unfortunately, a lot with a number of EEOC charges and class action lawsuits in my HR career, all stemming around discrimination. And I feel like if we would have just had maybe some training in the beginning, or we would have tracked these things, we could have had the real strong conversations before we got those letters in the mail. My least favorite EEOC class action lawsuit I was involved in was at Home Depot, and we had a store that they transferred me to on vacation because our new HR person had quit. I worked in the store. This is a long time ago. But we had 25 EEO charges that stemmed from that store, and it was a mess. And my HR admin was one of those people, and I can tell you for certain that she was discriminated against. So it was a lot. It was a mess. And it became a class action lawsuit in all of Kansas City. They actually shut down the store that I was working at. And my life was threatened, and my car was keyed, and I was just trying to uncover what was going on. It wasn't anything that I had done. It was what the last 3 store managers had done, and then the culture that they had fostered and created. My first week there, I noticed some people were calling in sick to work, or they didn't even show up. They showed up 2 hours late, and I just pulled somebody into the office and I said, "Hey, what's going on? Looks like you've been late for the last 3 Wednesdays." And they're like, "Oh, I take the red line. It doesn't get here until 10. And so all I did was I asked everybody on the cashier team, "Hey, what bus line are y'all taking?" And then I moved everybody's schedule. The number of people who probably got fired and were reprimanded and treated badly because of a simple oversight was part of the reason that this was wrong with the culture. But I'm very sure that no HR person or store leadership team took the time to ask what the red line was, or the blue line, or the green line. Because I'm like, I drove. I didn't know. I'm like, "What's the red line?" Like, "It's the bus." And I'm like, "Oh, can you get me a copy of the transit schedule?" And they're like, "What do you need that for?" I need to figure out, what everybody's schedule is going to be. So understanding maybe if there's turnover that's happening in one department or area than another, it could be something like that. And that was an easy change. I feel like if we would have done those things sooner, it would have saved us a whole lot of money at Home Depot. I also talked about performance learning and compensation particularly in terms of pay. Recently, Salesforce made a real massive change where they took a look at all of their compensation, and they realized that people were grossly underpaid, and they made adjustments. Even Kendra Scott is looking at these kind of things. They are doing this for their seasonal staff. They just completed a large reevaluation in terms of seasonal pay for their seasonal workers, because that time is coming up. I mean, when I was in retail, this was the time that I started planning in the store, and then I would start my hires in August and September for people to start in October. So making sure that we're looking at compensation by location, by position, and regular evaluations are important. I would encourage you, there's some really good compensation software that is just coming forth right now that is using artificial intelligence that I would encourage you maybe to go to, like the HR Technology Conference and check and see. There's some new advancements in this area, and I think this is going to be super helpful to us to make sure that we have pay equity, because it'll be able to see things in data that we aren't able to see, because we're not robots, we're not AI, we're just looking at things from the human component, not the numbers and the data components. Does that make sense? So if you're like, this is a lot of information, because I tend to just kind of dump all the things, you can text diversity, and I will send you all the resources we have here. I know my slides, I think, are in the app too, and you can also just text me and say, "Can I have the slides?" I can just put them in a PDF and send it to everybody in the group. But then when the book comes out too, I'll be able to share. And if you're interested, one of the things that I'm going to be doing by popular demand is for everybody who pre-orders the book, I'm going to be inviting them to a special webinar where I'm going to talk about TikTok and Reels and how you can make it happen. I think it's a really great way, and companies like Chili Piper, they're probably my favorite one right now. They are killing it on Reels and TikTok, and it's all candidate or employee information and videos. They're being shared. They have made phenomenal hires through their use of online videos. So I really think the creativity aspect is really limited to us and our time. You don't have to spend a lot of money to be able to do those kind of things. But what better way to showcase your diversity than through a 15-second video or a 60-second video, and especially the ones that are fun. The worst one that I have seen is also my favorite, and it's from DoorDash. And it's just delivery drivers talking about how they make some extra money to be able to afford tacos and drinks. It's really bad, but it has produced them a number of applications, and then they've been able to bring in some new drivers. It was a sponsor video that they were paying for, and I think it was so bad that that's why it works. So it doesn't have to be great to be effective. All right, time for questions, if anybody has any. I know we have a couple minutes. So my company is called Workology, and so the podcast is called the Workology Podcast. And I have a special section just on DEI where I just kind of nerded out and just interviewed heads of DEI. And that's how I came across Christy Robinson and others. Actually, I put a HARO request out to look for, to help a reporter to look for people who are in the DEI space and to hear. And I've done, I also try to make sure that we have a lot of diversity in our speakers too. So I want different kinds of people who are in the conversation. One of the other things that we have on the podcast too is I talk to heads of HR. It's primarily practitioners. I very rarely do I talk to a vendor or a consultant because I want to hear what you guys are doing and then share with others. I just posted in a podcast interview from, her name is Donna Miller. She's the Chief People Officer for Gordon Ramsay Restaurants. And it was really great talking restaurant and hearing about what she's doing as they're scaling as a franchise and the new store locations, restaurant locations they're opening. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. And if it's too much and you don't know where to start, just send me a text and ask me, and myself or my team, like that's what we do, is we just answer questions all day. Because I just record the podcast, we write the content, I speak on it or whatever, and then it's all for you guys. It's what I would have wanted. It's what I wanted when I was in corporate HR. I just wanted somebody like me to tell me where the things were so that I could do my job better and do it in less time. So thank you for your time today.